Hello, my name is Grace Lamont. I am in Business Communications with Ann Alexander, and I am going to be recording my presentation, my final presentation for the Business Communications class. My social problem I chose is the neglect and abuse in nursing homes, and my presentation title is Implementation of Strict Regulations in Nursing Homes. Just a little bit of purpose and background. The reason I chose this topic is because it's close to my heart. My grandfather was actually in a home that was neglectful, and they actually got charged for neglect for a couple of the members. And I just hoped that it would bring light to this issue so that more people would know. The purpose for this study is to really expose the issue and to make it known. I'd like to assess how effective the new regulations would be implementing them in the field so that we could reduce the amount of cases and abuse in these types of homes. A couple questions to be answered, that I hope to be answered by the end of this presentation is, number one, how often does this abuse take place? What are the definitions of neglect and abuse? What are the current types of regulations in place at these homes at this time? What are the thoughts of the general public regarding this type of abuse and neglect? And the way I'll figure that out is by issuing a short survey. And what regulations could help to drastically reduce or eradicate this issue? A couple of relevant definitions. I know most people are going to know basically what these mean, but I just wanted to get a set-in-stone definition of a couple of words that I'll be using a lot in this presentation. Abuse is to treat with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. So like riders who abuse their horses should be prosecuted. Neglect is to fail to care for properly. And nursing is the profession or practice of providing care for the sick and infirm. And I got these definitions from the Oxford University Press Dictionary. The primary research from this topic that I did is going to be a handwritten survey. I just wrote a couple of questions and handed it out to 5 people from different backgrounds, different areas in Michigan, different jobs, so I could get a little bit of a mixed crowd. The questions were, number 1, do you have a relative or friend who was or is in a nursing home or assisted living home? 2, have you ever heard about an instance of abuse or neglect in a nursing home? 3, what are some policies that you think are currently in place to regulate the safety and well-being of these patients? 4, what are some policies you think should be implemented if they aren't already? 5, what is your definition of neglect? And 6, if there were any other comments or anything regarding this topic. What I found from the survey was that 5 out of 5 people said that they did have a close friend or relative staying in a nursing home. And 4 out of 5 people said that they have heard of cases of abuse and neglect. 3 of those 4 people actually saying that they were their friends or loved ones that were in the homes at that time. Which is surprising to me, but this tells me that this topic is extremely relevant and something that needs to be exposed. Some more of the survey findings. Among the regulations the surveys thought were in place, these were the most common that they listed. We had anonymous observe and report policies for staff members so that they could, anonymously put in a complaint or something towards another member. An issue for this may be, if the members were friends, then they're not going to report something if their friend is doing something wrong, or if they actually refuting, they could be putting in a false report. But it could still be a very effective way to make sure things are going smoothly. Regulation of employee training. That is going to make sure that the state is regulating the training that the employees are getting and what they're learning before they're taking care of the members. Regulation of health and safety of clients. That's going to make sure that everyone is being watched over, the building codes, things like that just keep the patients safe. Regulation of health and safety of clients, which I just went over, and building safety is going to be mostly like the doorways, making sure that there's nothing people can trip over, just physical safety for the most part. There is a physician on duty at all times, or at least on call, they said, so that if anything goes wrong, there's someone there that knows what to do. And then safety check policies, which are like periodic checks that so the patients don't go for longer than a given amount of time by themselves. The survey's definitions of neglect were a couple of different things, but for the most part they seem to be on the same page. One was the purposeful act of mistreating or willingly ignoring someone who needs care. The lack of nourishment, lack of cleanliness, and lack of mental stimulation. Patients who aren't attended to for hours, and purposely not caring for someone for any reason, or treating someone badly on purpose. So they're all pretty much on the same track with neglect. A couple of recommendations from the surveys. The most common were going to be continuing education for caregivers, which continuing education is pretty prevalent in, real estate. I know nurses, doctors always have to be learning more and more as the years goes on. So it would be good to give this to the caregivers as well. Compassionate care training for all staff, which compassionate care will be explained a little bit later. Family meetings with patient planning committees, and weekly reports to a social worker from patients. These are all going to be explained, on a later slide. A couple of examples of this neglect and abuse. At the Grand Rapids Home for Veterans, 11 employees just got charged with falsifying medical records. Basically, they were writing down that they were doing safety checks every hour, which was in their policies, when the security cameras actually showed that they were not doing these safety checks, and some of the patients weren't checked on for upwards of 7 hours, and this is a big issue. Anything could happen in 7 hours. In another case, a nursing home closed its doors after a female patient was sexually abused by another male patient. The male patient was deemed cognitively intact, which means he didn't have any sort of Alzheimer's, and he was very there. And the female patient actually did have Alzheimer's. So this being said, he should have been watched over better, and this could have been prevented. The current regulations, the one that stood out to me the most in the rules and regulations on the LARA page was that it was Rule 501. The feelings, attitude, sensibility, and comfort of a patient shall be fully respected and given meticulous attention at all times by all personnel. Whereas this is the general idea of the rules. It's super vague and not very enforceable. You can't really enforce someone's feelings towards someone, and there's just not many, ways to follow this rule because it's so broad. And then in the policies and procedures for care section, it says that every nursing home / long-term care facility must have a care policy that is created by the administrator, a physician, and a director of nursing, and it has to be looked over by a patient care committee. I see that they're trying to regulate these policies and make sure that they're okay, but by having the actual homes create these policies, they're giving them a little too much freedom, I believe, because mostly people are going to go for what's going to get them the most money, because these are still businesses, and so it could become a little bit corrupt. And the enforcement issues, again, it's not going to be super easy to enforce a policy that's made by the home. Their enforcement issues also are causing a lack of accountability, and people aren't really knowing about this issue, so it's, a lack of belief. A couple of recommendations that we talked about briefly. Continuing education for caregivers. I know this is a lot of information, I'll just go over it pretty quick. This should be required in nursing homes because there's always developing and changing information in caregiving, for each patient. training the staff on compassionate care. Compassionate care is actually medical and emotional care for patients with terminal diseases to make their lives more comfortable. Now, where all of these patients aren't really going to be, terminal, it is still going to be a good training method for people to be compassionate to the patients. And then including weekly or monthly family meetings with the patient and their family and the doctor. This is going to make sure everyone's on the same page, that the patient is getting their care, and that everyone knows what's going on. And then patient meetings with social workers periodically can make sure that everything is being, they're being treated fairly, that they're getting the care they need, and that they have a way to, tell them if that's not happening. A couple more recommendations, to require few rules statewide instead of letting the nursing homes create their own rules. This would create more accountability, and another way to ensure that this is being followed, and it wouldn't allow for as much corruption. Hourly checks on all patients. Some homes already do these, but they are not required statewide. I think that this is a super important thing to do because this is going to ensure that they don't go for a very long amount of time unseen, so that nothing horrible can happen in longer than an hour. And then the nutrition of food is just so important for these people to stay healthy while they're in these homes. So the food should just be monitored for health and that it's not expired or anything. The summary, really, the research shows that current regulations in place allow these nursing homes to create their own policies. The policies should really be created by the state to be followed by the nursing homes, and they're really going to be looking to make money at this point, so we want to make sure that the patients are being treated well. Another issue is that there's the violations of these rules. They're going uncaught, unpunished, and the fines are going unpaid. We need to crack down on this to create more accountability and all that kind of stuff. The lack of discipline makes the rules seem less strict, and we need to fix that. For my conclusion, it's all, again, a lot of information, but just briefly, the issue of abuse and neglect in nursing homes is one that is unnecessary and could be prevented. All of my research shows that the enforcement of these issues are weak. They could be improved, and using the recommendations we've given, we should be able to eradicate most of this issue and bring these incidents at these homes down to a minimum and make sure that the neglect is not happening as much. We want nursing homes to be a pleasant place for people to go. We don't want people to dread going to a nursing home. It should be a home away from home. So all of my sources are going to be in the research report, and thank you for watching.